What's up, everybody? How's it going? I'm gonna wait for some people to join here. Let me make sure. Got some people in the chat room. Killer Instinct. What's up? I think I could get the chat room up in here on my screen too. Yeah. How's it going? Yeah, we're gonna have an interesting chat this morning. Let me actually, I gotta plug in my charger on my laptop. My laptop's about to die. Yeah, we should be good now. I don't even know if I need this light, do I? I don't know if it's better like that. What's going on? Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. Of course, check out the mystical-spiral-store.com. If you guys hasn't already checked out my website, there's new items up every day. Even this morning, I put up some new crystals and new items. Check that out. We got free crystals and stones going out with every order. And literally with each and every purchase, we're bringing the world to a higher frequency with every purchase with these items. So check that out, the mystical-spiral-store.com. And we're going to have an interesting discussion this morning. People joining in the chat room. Welcome. I don't know if I should start or if I should wait a little bit longer. I think we got a few people in there already. But it's going to be a very interesting story. And you see a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about the last few months, it's been all over the news about asteroids, comets. Recently an asteroid just came and into Iceland and broke up in the atmosphere, but we didn't even know about it until 2 hours before it hit. And a lot of things are happening all over the planet, and very interesting, because before we go into the main topic, I think you know people need to realize what's taking place, not just physically but spiritually on the planet. You know, there's a there's a conflict, just like the conflict that are spoken about in Vedic Wars, right? We're going through another problem just now. You know, back then it's between almost like warrior classes and priest classes, but it's about sacred knowledge. It's about sacred areas, sacred land, all of this, right? And we're going through the same thing now. It's about powerful, elite, religious, political organizations that want to dominate and control and take over certain things, right? And that's exactly what we have. That split Vedic populations in the past Aryan Vedic peoples, and it led to a lot of the civilizations that we see, like the Persians, the Assyrians, the Egyptians. A lot of these, these are all Vedic Orients, the Kassites, the Hittites, the what else do you have? The Mitanni, all these things that we were talking about. These are all Vedic Aryan peoples that are predominantly Vedic Aryan. And even today, especially when you go in the mountainous regions of the Middle East, like the Kurds people, the Persian people, Armenians, they're predominantly Vedic Aryan origin, right? And this is Nephilim bloodlines infiltrated into that as well, and Nephilim knowledge that was applied in certain ways that led for a division between divine and evil, right? Even these certain words that we're going to be discussing is related to this, and it's reflecting in what's happening nowadays, right? We're at the same precipice that they were back then. We're at a time where the planet is going to be, reseeded, and civilizations are going to fall and be rebuilt, and things are going to collapse and be restarted, right? This is a time that we're in right now. I mean, and there's first we need to break down, I guess, the names, because in the Vedic, for anybody that's ever studied like ancient Vedic, and for people that don't think that the Aryan and Vedic peoples are not rooted in the how the Middle East all started, like Persia and a lot of these religions, like Zoroastrian religions and the Assyrians and all of this, they all came from Aryan and Vedic peoples, like that split off, right? And so people that don't think so is really, really wrong. And it was a war between what they call the Brahmins and the Satrias, right? Or you can even say the Asuras and the Devas, which is basically the warriors and the priest class, right? The Asuras are like these spiritual warrior peoples, right? They're also looked at as divine, right? And then you have the Devas, who are looked at as like the Brahmins, the priests, right? And the Asuras are like the Satrias, these warrior peoples, right? And they were at war with one another in the Vedic Wars, and those conflicts between those Aryan peoples is what led to Persian religions being started, and Persian peoples and Assyrians and all of this, right? So the word Asura is something that we're going to first break down first before we get into even and Deva, right? These are two words that are linked to this, and this is very interesting before we even go into like the Assyrians and those people, because that their name is actually derived from that term, right? And it's a word I discussed before as well. Even so, Asura is Asura, right? Asura. So the root of that is as. So that means in Vedic is very interesting. It means to sit or to be or to have divine power and sit, to have like mental power and sit on your throne, then have mental power, right? And later on, after these conflicts, it got degraded in its meaning, and it started to mean something of lesser. It meant power, but of a lesser power, and now meant like power by using brute force and evil aggression and violence. All right. But before, it meant being divine and sitting on your throne and having mental power. Like this is where the idea of a galactic chair, a galactic, almost like computer type throne made of gold, glowing throne, that's where the term as comes from in AS. It means to sit or to be or to sit on your throne and have divine mental power, right? And it's actually where the term Osiris comes from. Osiris comes from Asar, Asar, Asar. It's the same thing. It comes, and Osiris is always portrayed as a throne, sitting on his throne and having this divine power, right? And he comes from Asar, Asar, comes from the same thing as Asura, right? And this is where the Assyrians actually get their name. Assyrians are from their god, their sun god, Ashur, Ashur, Ashur. Even the Persians, they used it Ahura, Ahura Mazda, or Ahura. Instead of Asura, it's a pronunciation shift, and a little syllable shift, but it's in Persian, it's Ahura, Ahura, right? And it's Asura in Vedic, but it's in Assyrians, they just use Ashur, Ashur, right? So it goes into that. It goes in Egyptian with like I said, with Osiris, Asar and Osiris, and it comes from that root as to sit, to be on your throne, and to be, to become, to sit on your throne and have this mental power, this divine power. And Asura is one of the main names that we find in the Rig Veda, right? The Rig Veda, and how everybody joining in the chat room, welcome everybody. I'm glad everybody's joining in there now. In the Rig Veda, Asura is one of the main names of the divine, right? It's second only in frequency and importance of usage to Deva, right? Deva. And then, like I said, later on, it because there was a conflict and the people split, instead of calling one word divine, the other people would call that word evil. Asura meant to become evil later on. And then the other people would use the word Deva as evil, right? And so they were, the names got to mean opposite meanings to certain people after the conflicts. But at one time, originally in the Rig Veda, they were unified as meaning divine, Deva and Asura. They were together as divine. But then when the conflict happened between these two peoples, that's when these names took on alternate meanings. And some people would call Asura as meaning demon or something like this, or evil power. And some people would call Deva as meaning that, and vice versa, right? So this wasn't by happenstance or accident that this happened. This happened because of the direct conflict between these Aryan peoples, these Aryan Vedic people, right? And in the Rig Veda, we find the original meaning of Deva and Asura perfectly intact. It means like to have almighty power. It's the power of the great gods, right? And in the Rig Veda, it basically means, Asura basically means like the Almighty. It's very similar to the Christian Almighty God, right? Not the same. I'm not saying it's the same, but it's a very similar term that they use. And the term Asura is very interesting in how it's used, because it basically, it can be applied to a lot of different ancient Vedic gods. And it can even have an almost like a monotheistic hint to it for the divine, because it's like the ultimate supreme God, right? And even they have these solar godheads, right? Even Varuna, right? The god of the solar and cosmic ocean, right? Is one of the gods of divine judgment, and he's a god of that either is going to even determine what happens when you die, like your sin and your karma, right? Very similar to other gods that we find in these other religions and Egyptian and all of that, right? And Asuras basically, the worship of them, it's more connected to the Satrias, right? It's pronounced Kshatriya, but it's spelt like Kshatriya, like that, but it's pronounced Kshatriya or something close to that, right? And it's a Vedic religion of the noble warrior classes, right? These that are Nephilim infused, right? They're Aryan Nephilim infused. And there's a war going on between how this ancient knowledge of both warrior knowledge, priestly spiritual knowledge, high knowledge, secret knowledge, how it's used and how it's applied. And there's a break off between what's divine and what's being evil, right? And their gods, the Asuras, were descendants of Aryan kings. They are Aryan in origin, and their gods are originally Vedic gods, right? And the use of the name Asura, it means divine. It originally meant divine. And then sometimes now it can mean also demon to some peoples, right? So in the Vedic era of the Brahmins, that you also find this. Yeah. Welcome, Matteo. We got Matteo in the chat room. He hasn't been here in a while. He hasn't caught me in a while or whatever. Who else is there? We got like 18 people in the chat room. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad everybody's here today too, because it's a good time. There's a lot going on in the world. People need to chill out and have some cool stuff to dig into. And this is all relevant information because these areas, these lands, there's a reason why these lands are at war to this very day in many of these lands. And the knowledge is being severely researched on definitely, hey, Emily, and on all different fronts, right? And the Kshatriyas, they were priests, right? They were warrior priests too, right? But they were in harmony with one another at the time at a time. You know, it was equal to Deva. They were equally meaning as divine. And when the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, they were like these priests and warriors that were quarreling, and they have all these conflicts. And in the Rig Veda, when these battles take place, Asura then splits off and means this evil name, right? It means to have a now it doesn't mean to have this mental power where you can sit and have this mental power. Now it means you have brute force power, you know, and you're evil, right? So that is it's a very interesting thing, the part of that, and where these names come from, you know. And we had conflicts between what they would call spiritually minded priests and worldly minded kings, right? Also between spiritually minded kings and worldly minded priests, and then also conflicts between spiritually and worldly minded kings and spiritually and worldly minded priests, right? This is how other religions and other languages, all this stuff was starting to be developed in all these people that led to the Persians, the Assyrians, and later Vedic texts like the Puranas, right? And the Brahmanas, right? The Asuras, they first overcome these devas, and then later on they're defeated by them again. And then it's like they have this the age of the Treta Yuga, and in the third age, or Treta Yuga, this is where the earliest, this is like the early area of the Vedic history that we have, and I mean, most people are clueless to the impact of the Vedic Aryan people on the Persians and all of this, right? For sure, their knowledge is Aryan and Vedic in origin predominantly, and the ancient Persian religions and languages, and if their whole culture is Aryan, it's very close to Vedic. The Zoroastrians, they have, of course, instead of saying Asura, like I said, it's just a sound shift. They use Ahura, like Ahura Mazda, right? And Deva, that also has, you know, to some people, it becomes undivine as well. It means demonic. It has a sound shift and spelling to Deva as well. They, you know, there's an opposite shift to it. And this happens, you know, it's a duality of words that happens with a few things, I think, when these Vedic wars happen. Welcome, Justin, in the chat room, Emily, everybody out there that's out there today. And when the I don't know when the date of, I think the date of Zoroastrian is like 600 BC, around there. But it's funny because like I think it was Aristotle who said in his writings that Zoroastrianism was like Zoroaster came from like 6,000 BC or something like this, right? What's good, Zach, in the chat room as well. And that's weird for I don't know why Aristotle and the Greeks were trying to say that Zoroaster came from like 6,000 BC in his writings, right? What's up, Zach, as well. But the supreme deity, it was a solar deity. Now this is a solar deity of the Persians, was Ahura Mazda, right? Let me see if it's better with the light on here. I don't know if that's better. Is that better, guys, with the light like that, or is it better without the light? Let me know in the chat room. But Justin Garrison, whoa, cool. Yeah, Mithra. Yep, it's, you know, Ahura Mazda is associated with Mithra. You're right. When the morning stars sang together, that's right. That's very knowledgeable. I'm glad you said that. Ahura Mazda is associated with Mithra, as is Varuna with Mitra. You know, Mitra. You know, and it's Varuna that's this also a supreme god. You know, and the Persian religion also has these hints of monotheism. You know, that they have this almighty supreme god, right? And it also, you know, it shows how there's a universality of the Vedas, you know, just like the Vedas, it's closer to the Rig Veda. And Zoroaster had, you know, had almost like a monotheistic he hint to it, right? He was like, he turned a polytheistic, you know, culture, and from an earlier religion, he changed it. And they practiced also too, the Zoroastrians, they had a fire worship also going on, like Vedics, right? Where they had these crazy chants to certain deities, right? To Indra, Agni, right? Indra and Agni would be also Atar, they would use, or Soma would be Heoma, right? And you have Zoroaster, you know, there's a lot of interesting things with Zoroaster, even how he received this book of the law in a lightning flash on the top of the mountain is very similar to a Moses type of thing as well, right? So, you know, ancient Persia sometimes too, they had this whole area that went all the way to the Indus River, you know, all the way down, you know, and all the way along the Indus, and even all the way, you know, I mean, even like Afghanistan, northern Afghanistan, even further than that. I think sometimes in Afghanistan, people don't realize both Persian and Hindu origins come from Afghanistan. There's ancient Persian writings called the Avesta, Avesta. For those that don't know, it's called the Avesta. And this is where you can find references to this region, right? Somebody. Yeah, so what's up in the chat room? Freddie Mercury could be a descendant of the Nephilim. Yeah, it did look like he had like this double row of teeth, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. No, I think that something about Freddie Mercury too. I think that like he never wanted to get his teeth changed because he thought that because he did have like snaggletooth type stuff going on. I don't think he had double rows of teeth, but there were giants. That is one of the traits to Nephilim or Rephaim type tribes. They had these double rows of teeth. They had 6 fingers, 6 toes, 24 in all. And they did have double rows of teeth. I mean, the Smithsonian took most of them. But the Avesta are these ancient Persian scriptures. And there's references that show that the Persians actually first came from Afghanistan. That's Vedic area, right? For sure. And Zoroaster had his first, and I got allergies to the freaking cat upstairs too. Zoroaster had his first, his patron king, his greatest and first was Vishtaspa of Balk, right? Or Bactria. And I think he was both. He died in that area, and some say that he was even born in that area as well. And the Zoroastrian religion, from my research, and apparently from what I've read in other people's research, it actually arose in Afghanistan area and then spread west, right? And displaced Vedic Aryans in Iran and places like that, right? And Persians under the great Persian king Cyrus, they had conquered Babylon and all of that, Babylonia, and they already had one of the biggest empires going, right? And all the way that went bordered India, right? And it's ridiculous to think that Aryans were in India first, right? It was what was going on with the Vedic and Indian tribes that led to the Middle East religions and Persians and all of that, right? And that's very important to remember. And the Persians didn't defeat the Deva that were worshiping Vedic people very easy. They didn't. Didn't happen right away. And even as late as the Persian Emperor Xerxes, there was mention of the destruction of lands of the Deva worshippers in Persia, right? Even in these regions that are just south of the Caspian Sea. I don't know if he had a double row of teeth, Freddie Mercury, but I know that he didn't want to get his teeth changed because he felt like it would alter his voice, and he did have incredible range. It's possible. It's possible he was born with some things. I know his teeth did look a little jacked up, like he had like snaggletooth going on or whatever, but he but the Brahmin and the Satrias, their war, their conflict, that's what led to what I was saying, that this opposite meaning. And it's so interesting because the division of the knowledge of what was going on and the ultimate corruption of the people because of the knowledge is what led to all these amazing civilizations after the flood, right? These Persians and all of this, right? And Deva and it shows a conflict between the falsehood and truth and between spiritually and worldly people, right? And these splits of good and evil, it became what they would call a mythological division of good and evil, right? And it didn't mean like, it wasn't unified anymore as meaning divine. It became like a god demon conflict between priests and warriors, right? And this is all because of this Nephilim knowledge involved, right? Even in Sanskrit, these words have very interesting meanings. Like the word, like we broke down the word as, but the word div, right? D-I-V is another one for Deva, because Deva is spelled D-E-V-A, but the root is D-I-V, right? The div, right? Diva or Deva, Diva right? It's diva basically because the root is D-I-V, right? And it means like God or divine, but it also can mean to play, right? Even in Persian, it came to mean to deceive, right? But there's a game in Sanskrit that's div, that's also like it means like a game of dice, right? And interesting, so it means like to play. It's like a game of, and then the root, as like I said, it meant like to have mental power, to sit there and have this mental power. And then later the Vedas, it stood for power, but in a much, much lower sense. It meant this brute force and violence by overtaking people with physically, and no longer meant to sit on your throne and to be and to have power. Just like Osiris, that's the original blueprint that got degenerated over time as having a throne with a king sitting on his throne, right? This came from having some sort of high technology chair, like a galactic chair that's connected to the cosmos, where the priest or pharaoh or king, his certain bloodline would be connected to this chair of gold, this glowing chair that would give them a sense of divinity, and it would give them cosmic knowledge, right? This is where the ultimate throne comes from. It's like a chair, a galactic chair, right? Similar to like a Montauk chair almost, but way, way deeper, right? And we're talking about, that's the root to Asura, the root of as. As means that. That is the definition of that throne and the definition of Osiris. This is what Osiris means. Osiris comes from Asar, A-S-A-R, Asar. And Asar means to be, to sit on your throne and have power. Osiris is always symbolized with a throne, and he's this sun god of the underworld, of the divine, of judgment as well. He's almost it goes deeper, right? And it's interesting because how it got degenerated later on. It no longer was having this sitting on your throne and having mental power. It meant now brute force power, right? And also in ancient writings of both the Vedas and what I mentioned earlier, the Persian Avesta, right? They mention Aryan enemies that were really highly guilty of using magic and things like this for negative purposes, right? And it talks about this in both of the not only the Persian Avesta, but it talks about this in the Vedas as well. And this is directly Nephilim knowledge, right? And this is Aryan and Vedic knowledge that ended up in Assyria, and it ended up in Persia. It ended up with the Hittites and the Kassites and the Mitanni. Now, I talked about in my last video that I did with the Osiris. Is Osiris also Anu? Well, we'll get into this a little bit because Osiris is also very similar to Yama, right? The Vedic Yama. So we'll get into that as well. But there was negative, evil use of magic and power that's talked about in these ancient writings, right? And it's Nephilim sciences that were infused within the knowledge obtained. This is what the war was over. This is what knowledge to make you either become divine or demonic. It was Nephilim secrets and contamination of the DNA that led to these wars, right? And the Assyrians, now the ancient Assyrians, this is interesting because they are a perfect example of this Asura, right? Their very name, and this information that we're talking about here is directly from my Vedic Wars chapter of my book that I'm writing, right? Directly from some of this, right? So you can get the deeper information on this and my remote viewings about a lot of this information in these regions on my patreon.com/the mystical spiral. And of course, you got to go to the Mystical Spiral store for the highest grade crystals you could find out there that have been charged at sacred sites and with sacred frequencies, some of them 432 hertz. And of course, my copper items and all that. So guys, check that out as well. But just like what we were talking about, the Persian Ahura Mazda, right? And even the Egyptian, right? So wait, because the Assyrians, right? Their name, before I move on to that, like their name, even their main city that is derived from Asura, right? The name of their main city and their main god is Ashur, 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 right? So that's right from Asura. It's just a sound shift. Ashur, Asura, it's the same thing, right? The Assyrian Ashur is the Vedic Asura and was a solar deity. It was a sun god. It was a militaristic, powerful god of domination and overtaking things, right? And just like the Persian Ahura Mazda and even the Egyptian sun gods, what's very interesting, that's incredible, that I find, is that all of these civilizations, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Egyptians, I think even the Hittites or the Kassites, they all used the winged disc as their sun god symbol and as their symbol, that winged disc, right? And the Assyrians were mostly the Satrias, predominantly Kshatriya warriors. They were warrior, militaristic conquering people, right? They were a culture of taking empire, you know, and they had a reputation of this, right? The Assyrians, they were like Asura warriors, you know, and they were, and then, like I said, like I mentioned earlier, when we get to the Egyptians, you have, of course, the Asar, Asar. This is where you get the name Osiris from. For those that don't know, the Egyptian name Osiris is derived from Asar, Asar. That's where Osiris is. This. They even call it at one point Asar Netar. And you know, so that means like you know, like this Netar is even used in the Vedas. That word, that very word, also means divine, right? And Asar, like the Vedic root as, means the same thing. What was Asar or Osiris symbolized by? He was symbolized to be, to sit, to by a throne, to sit and have power, right? And in Vedic cultures, Asura meant to have power, right? And then later on, it got derived to a different way, right? And there's a cosmic galactic throne type, usually gold as well. You know, it's usually, and this is telepathic link. It's how people are connected to bringing fireballs down. You know, a lot of these deities, when they're sitting on their throne or they're wearing their certain headwear or carrying their certain headwear, they'll bring fireballs down, like I talked in our last episode, right? And this is what these thrones are related to as well. It's connected to the cosmic consciousness, and it's connected to fireballs and asteroids and meteors and all of this. And this is what brings DNA down. And you'll see throughout our history, and this is a big part of my book as well, is that we had telepathic warnings, which I believe are coming from our Oort cloud and structures within our Kuiper belt, before we had virus come, right? Which was directly, in my opinion, from meteor showers and asteroid activity and cometary activity, cometary dust, right? You would have certain events like Fatima, and then you would have not only Fatima, but you would have, what was the other one? I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now. But it was with Saint Bernadette. I don't know why I'm Lord. Was it? I don't know if that was Lord. Yeah, Lords. You had things like this, right? Like, well, with Fatima, you had this telepathic warning, and then you had certain things that were not followed through this telepathic warning, and then you had the Spanish flu. You had wars break out, all of this, and it changed the society, right? And bacteria's virus, all of that comes from comets, cometary dust, asteroids, meteor showers. They come in, and we had telepathic warnings almost every time before it was injected into us, right? And it's all connected, right? And there's technologies that can tap into what's being put down into our atmosphere, right? And we have a cosmic galactic telepathic link to it all, right? And especially ones that were made much bigger than us and had a much higher hyper senses than us, right? And you'll see there's so many Marian apparitions that are related to warnings that were related to meteors and stuff coming down in comets. And we're coming to a point in our cycle where we're going to be reseeded if our collective consciousness does not change. And it's happening right before our eyes, right? And that was the idea of these thrones, I believe, originally. They were like cosmic consciousness connected to stars, suns, comets, fireballs, all of that cometary celestial activity. Like Assyrians and Persians and Egyptians, all of them used the winged disc as well as a sun god symbol. This is not a primitive way of saying the sun just goes over the horizon. There's much more to this. And it was linked into that throne symbol as well. And also being over the gateway, right? And also the Egyptians, just like all of the Indo-Aryans and Assyrians and ancients, right? Vedics, they all had a solar dynasty of kings, or what they would call pharaohs, right? You know, so what's up, Lucky, in the chat room? That's from Truth Frequency News. She's from Truth Frequency Radio, from where I do a show every Saturday night, guys, from 7 to 9 Eastern. If you don't already know, now you know. I'm on Truth Frequency Radio every Saturday night, where I do shows like this on audio with music and all of that. So nowhere else are you finding information like this out there. You know, you would have to do a lot of research and a lot of different books to put it all together, and it's my own stuff added in and all of that. So this is a very unique channel here. Actually, I started some other channels too. One of them already got 2 strikes. I had to take down all the content that I had little UFC clips in, but I had done some combat sports interviews and things like that. And I also have my Copper and Crystals channel. You guys subscribe at Sacred Taurus, Copper and Crystals. Shout out to La Lova Girl for a donation just now. And yeah, everybody, that is a really good idea. If you can possibly donate, not only do I have projects that I need to start and places that I need to go to help out with this world, but there's certain things that I need, and I've been putting in a lot of work to try to get them, that if we all pitched in together, it would really help out. And it's been a real struggle to even try to keep everything going recently lately, you know, because I pretty much risked it all to try to do the copper, the crystals, and the information, and write a book and do the radio and everything else that I've been working on to try to bring the world to a higher frequency collectively, not just through the information, but through the products. And it's been a real struggle, man. It's been a real struggle, and there's no way I'm going to give up now. I recently just started a project with Richard C. Hoagland too. I'm sort of a part of that. I was on his show like a week or so ago, so I'll be periodically going back and forth on that show about that project I'm part of. And I'm going to be actually starting a weekly show on Leak Project as well, for Rex Bear. I talked to Rex about that already. So I'm in the middle of working on some interesting things that there's gonna be a lot more coming. And of course, I do all my remote viewings and all of my articles and research and knowledge from my book is on Patreon. So you want to support me also on Patreon. And you know, you can subscribe for as little as $2 a month, and you get amazing information on there. Like, you can't get it anywhere else, for sure. Asar, just like that. It meant that, you know, and this is what Vedics meant. Asura, you know, meant to have this power. And the winged disc is linked right to that. And the solar dynasty of kings is very interesting because that comes from Vedic origin. That comes from straight Vedic origin. And yeah, shout out to La Lover Girl. Thank you. You know, and also just like the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Vedic sun gods were symbolized by the falcon or the hawk. And just like Egyptians, Vedic symbols they used, they like the lotus, the spotted cow, right? The bull, all of these were used in ancient Egypt and Vedic. And the very first pharaohs was just like the Vedic Indra. They were talked about as these destroyers of cities and all of this, right? There's examples that you could find in all the ancient writings. And Yama was the Vedic god of the dead, right? Yama is also called Asuniti, the guide of the spirit, right? Who sort of like guides the soul after he goes, right? And this is exactly like Osiris. This is Osiris. Osiris is called Asar Netar, right? Netar is means divine, and it's a guide, you know, it's a divine guide. And there's Vedic hymns and Egyptian hymns that are almost exactly alike. There's hymns to Osiris, right, that are exactly like Vedic hymns. And I've talked about it before. Amen Ra is the same as Om Rama. When you say Amen Ra, it's the same as Om Rama. Same thing, right? Is it better when I do the light or without the light? Let me know in the chat room. Is it definitely, which way is better? With the light or without the light on the camera? Oh, my other channel, I'll type it in right here. The light's better. Yeah, that's my other channel, Sacred Taurus, Copper and Crystals. That's the other one there. Hold on one second. All right. Yeah, I'll use the light too. So yeah, like we were saying, I have that, and I also have Combat Sports TV International that I started too. And I had a couple of videos on my Combat Sports channel that went viral. They had like 50, 60,000 views in like 8 hours, and they were bound to get hundreds of thousands of views. And then they got I got 2 strikes on both of the videos. And then they were like, if you get one more strike, we're going to remove all your channels. So I had to take down all the videos that I had that had little UFC clips in them, because I had put music behind like 12-second clips of some fights, like from recent fights. And I guess the UFC don't even let you use 12 seconds of theirs. So I don't know how all these other people get away with it. But I got 2 strikes right away. And I couldn't believe it. They were going like viral. And the videos I did where I interviewed like UFC legends, they got like 100 views. But then when I did a little clip of like these fights that just recently happened, because I know what people want to see when it comes to that, because I've been involved with it for my whole life, and I know who's relevant right now. So I used some relevant fights that just happened that were important moments, and I took a little clip and I put my own music behind it, and they were out for like a day, and they got a lot of views, and they got flagged, even though the views still counted to my account, but they gave me strikes for that stuff. But yeah, Natar is another name that's interesting, because that's another name that's used for divine. And like those Vedic hymns that I talked about, there's some Vedic hymns that are very interesting, like Yama. And Yama is like Osiris, like we were saying. He's a divine son who's sacrificed. And he's supposedly, many believe that he was sacrificed to give humans a new path, right? And Yama is associated with Varuna, and they both are also called sometimes in the Rig Veda. I think it's in the Rig Veda. They're called the two kings. And Yama hymns in Rig Veda are same like Egyptian hymns. They're the same thing. Even some of them are talking about bodies being mummified, like preserving bodies after death. All right. So this is very interesting. I find it very interesting, right? And Egyptians called the western land that the sun sets in the land of Manu, right? And this is also where they buried their kings, the Thebes. This was called the mountain of Manu, right? If this doesn't show that there's Vedic links, I don't know what is. They even had like this, I don't know if it was a Persian god, or it was the Kassites, but one of them even had a god they called Himalaya or something like this. So they're so if that doesn't show it, I don't know what does. I think it was the Kassites or the Hittites or the Kassites that had that. But I think it was from the Kassites. There was they show that there's in that whole Middle East area they had that Vedic influence. Oh wow, you trained with Kron Gracie? I'm looking in the chat room. Wow, that's amazing. I would love to meet Kron. I've met Henzo Gracie and a few other Gracies. My friend Onishi. Onishi actually teaches in Dubai now for Henzo. He was a Hyan Gracie black belt, and then when Hyan died, he became Hyan's brother Henzo's black belt. And then he came and was teaching from Brazil. He came to teach in New York, right next to where I was living at one time. We became good friends, and now he's actually teaching in Dubai. But yeah, Kron is ice cream Kron, right? Ice cream man, cool as ice cream. I think he trains with the Diaz brothers a lot too. Yeah, he's cool. But yeah, I think it was the Kassites that had a god that they even named Himalaya. Right. So crazy, and there's interesting the Hittites even used the winged disc as well, not just the Egyptians, but the Hittites. And what's interesting too about the mummying is that they have some writings in the Puranas, and it's spelled Puranas, right? This is a ancient Vedic writings as well. This is more. I think it's more, more recent than the Rig Veda. I think the Rig Veda is older, but they talk about, just like in Egyptian, the pharaohs, the corpse of Nimi, Nimi. You can see even times my nose has been broken. My nose is crooked. My nose has been broken. You can see a few times. You can see it's all bent. Plus, I got all scars in my eyebrows. When you really look, I got scars all through my eyebrows from years of getting elbowed and my nose broken. That's why I had a couple of amateur fights, but then I had 2 pro Muay Thai fights. That was enough for me. I had gotten like concussions in both of them, and I had a 5-round fight with a high level pro Muay Thai fighter, and I didn't even realize the fight. Like when the fight was over, I thought we were still going into the 3rd round. I like missed like 3 rounds, so I was like, that's enough. If unless I was going to compete at a really high level and make a lot of money, it wasn't worth it. That definitely wasn't worth the head damage I was taking. And once you take pro fights, you can't go back. And I took a pro fight too quick. Once you go pro, you can't go back to amateur once you make that crossover. So, but as there's this the corpse of Nemi, like I was discussing. Yeah, well, there's literature and there's oral traditions in all cultures. Most of the real secret stuff was passed down orally, or secretly in some way, But there's an account given of even the corpse of Nemi. Like I said, it was talked about as being preserved from decay by being embalmed with these resins and fragrant oils, and it remained entire as if it were immortal. Right? It says it right in the Puranas like that. And there's another writing, the Kashi Kanda. There's an account that's given of a Brahmin who actually carries his mother's corpse all the way from Benares, and like all the way to Benares or something like this, which is modern day Varanasi, right? It's a sacred area. And when he gets there, he washes it with 5 secretions of a cow. Like he gives milk, curds, and he also puts ghee, honey, sugar, all this stuff, right? And all these compositions of stuff that he embalms her with, like musk and saffron and camphor and sandalwood and resins. There was this resin that was called Kakola, Kakkola, right? And then he envelopes it in severely with all of this netravastra, the flowered muslin, all this stuff, right? Patamura, silk, coarse cottons, a certain Nepal blanketing. There's cloth that's dyed with madder and all these other items. And then he covers the whole thing with all this pure clay. And then he puts that whole thing into a coffin of copper, right? And even today, to this very day, this knowledge and practices are completely looked at as being impure and totally unknown, right? In our present times, this is a very ancient stuff, and they put it all in clay and in a friggin' coffin of copper. Isn't that incredible, right? So, yeah, Hyperborea, all that, the Vedics are no doubt the oldest and knowledge that came from pre-flood, right? And one of the oldest cultures on the planet. And the Aryans, Indo-Aryans, all of that, it all led to Persians and all those civilizations. And the knowledge of the ancients can be applied in good and bad ways. And the knowledge of copper can be applied in amazing ways that can bring our mind, body, and soul to a higher frequency. I can't say it enough. It's the only reason why I work with copper and crystals. And I told you the best way with the crystals too, even with like the clusters that I have, I'm actually getting new clusters in this week. And I just put up new moonstone and labradorite up today and all this stuff. I mean, some of these just go in the shower, hold them underneath the water like you're in a waterfall, and then watch all the pain just spiral off your body as well. Let it go down the drain. Imagine, do those visuals. You need some sort of grounding as well, and all sorts of smoky quartzes and Hopi petrified stones, grounding stones. I have grounding stones and petrified wood. So check out the mysticalspiralstore.com. I just unloaded a lot of information on you. These are the Vedic wars of Nephilim knowledge. of the Asura-Devas, right? Of the Satrias and the Asuras, right? The Satrias and the Brahmins, I mean, right? Or the Devas and or Divas and the Asuras, right? The Asuras are the Satrias. The Brahmins are the Devas, right? And it's a lot of information. But you know, there's it's interesting when we even look at these mummified the information between the Vedic and because they have you know, of course, the Vedic Manu that's talked about in ancient Egypt as well. They also have Nimi, Nimi, is one of the early Vedic kings, and he's a Vedic solar king, right? A solar king, and he's talked about as uh, have conducted 1,000-year-long sacrifice, and he's described in the Puranas as being this Egyptian, almost like an Egyptian mummified pharaoh. He's like, you know, he's preserved by using resins and oils, and he's preserved almost like he was. It says he's entire as if he were immortal, right? And he conducted 1,000-year-long sacrifice. It's incredible, right? So yeah, check me out, guys. The Mystical Spiral Store.com, patreon.com/the Mystical Spiral. And yeah, right here on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button, because this is information you can't find anywhere else. And the next show, we're going to be talking more about the scarab and Kepra and the harmonic law of Mat, M-A-A-T, and how this is related as well to the red granite obelisks and a lot of other things, as well as scarab stones and the 18th dynasty. So this is a weekly show we're going to be doing right here at Exploring the Ka, and on Patreon is where you can get my exact remote viewings of these topics. Like, I have a lot of information I've been discussing about the Euphrates and Tigris River area, which relates to all of this as well. And I have remote viewings of the exact locations along the Euphrates River where I believe there are installations that are related to bringing down comets, stargates for comets. And this is an area where we had cometary activity in the past. The Amara crater, the Burkle crater that we have even in the Indian Ocean, right? And I believe the Book of Revelation is talking about our future having comet bombardments coming in with hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of meteorites coming off of that. And asteroid preparation has been used. And yeah, now that I look at my nose in the camera, I can see how off it is. It's like shifted this way. It's like shifted one way. It never was set right that one time. But yeah, now that if you guys look, NASA has been preparing for asteroid strikes. They've been doing demonstrations and preparing for it for a while now, for the last few months. So they don't spend millions of dollars on these tests and demonstrations and all the stuff that they've been doing for nothing, you know? Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Brian O'Shea. And I actually have some new products I'm working on too, with copper tubes and with selenite and different things like that. So who else is in there? Shout out. Oh, we got 40 people in the chat. It's not bad. Definitely shout out to La Love a Girl for donation. And we could definitely use the donations at the mysticalspiral.com, at the PayPal or wherever as well. And the mysticalspiralstore.com is where you can get my products, of course. And you'll find me on the Leak Project. I don't know when I'm going to be back on Richard C. Hoagland, but I'll be on the Leak Project for sure coming up soon. And I'll be here. I'll be on my Patreon as well tonight. If you guys want to join, it's patreon.com/the mystical spiral. So check you guys later. And Maybe I'll even be on YouTube later as well. It's glad you guys are in the chat room. You guys are some of the most knowledgeable